Hey, what's up everyone? So we have something to talk about with the recent Berlin tournament wrapping up and patch 3.06 coming out. What is the meta shaping up to look like? Now, something to keep in mind is the Berlin tournament was actually played on patch 3.04, so none of the recent changes have hit, but this was our opportunity to see the best of the best from Valorant's pros, and what we saw from Berlin wasn't just experimental comps and agents they're playing around with. This is what they believe is the best comp for them to run in the biggest tournament yet. So, what did we learn? Well, as for all of our tier lists, this isn't only designed for pro play. You're not professional players and you want to know what is going to be best for you to play in your matches. So obviously that should be considered. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all factors from agent changes to what we saw in Berlin to what is happening in our ranked games from Immortal lobbies, and we will try to best give you an idea of what you should be playing right now. Sounds good to you? Sweet. Let's get into it, wasting no time, starting out with our C tier. Now, listen, a lot of the agents in the lower tiers are going to remain more or less the same. There was no game-breaking changes to these guys all that much, and the bottom of the C tier, that's why you're going to see from last time, Yoru and Brimstone. Yoru was played for one game in Berlin, and it didn't go too hot, and Brimstone didn't see much play either. You can still get value out of both of these agents, but they're just not the cream of the crop, and that's okay though. I'm sure we'll still get a bunch of comments telling me how I disrespected Yoru and I'm an idiot, and I guess that's all just part of the job. Speaking of the job, by the way, I've been putting in a ton of work to bring you guys some new content for the website, so if you're looking to check out some of the new Radiant VOD reviews or courses tailored to bringing you exactly what you need to learn to improve at Valorant, be sure to check all that out over at SkillCapped.com, link in the description below. Moving on to our B tier though, we actually have Omen to start us out. Omen has been pretty decent for some time now, and we've always been placing him high on our tier list due to his simplicity, and he's a solid controller who can easily be picked up by anybody. However, that doesn't necessarily equate being the best controller, and what we saw at Berlin is that Omen actually saw very little play. Astra and Viper were absolutely the preferred controllers, and sure, maybe he's alright in solo queue, but it's highly recommended that if you're looking for the best controller to play, you look further than Omen. In his current state, he really just doesn't compete with Astra and Viper, and it sucks to see that that's where he's at right now. Breach is going to be taking his place right above Omen though, and to be fair, it's not like Breach is just terrible, he's just not really your first pick when assembling a team comp. Like, what are you going to think about in agent select? Well, you probably want a Jet, and maybe another duelist, and then you need a controller, and then you're probably going to want a Sentinel to watch flanks, and now you only really have room for one more agent, so are you going to pick Breach over every other agent in the game? Probably not. You're probably going to pick Sova or Skye or maybe even KO after his buffs. Obviously, you don't need to run a meta team comp, but in most standard team comps, this is what you're going to see. And that's why you didn't see Breach much in Berlin or in your comp games. He just doesn't bring that much to the table when you compare him to most agents in most team comps. Who else is in our B tier though? Well, actually we have two more duelists. That's weird, right? All duelists must be S tier. Clearly that's what everybody wants to play in comp. Well, in Phoenix and Reyna's case, they're both being played some in Berlin, but it definitely feels like on niche maps, and they don't really show to be must picks on really any map. And there are currently 5 duelists in the game, and you'll always have other options between Reyna and Phoenix, namely your other options being Raze or Jet. Or you don't even need to run a duelist, as you're seeing many teams are running Skye in place of a duelist, and especially after these KO changes, I suspect he'll be a great alternative to these agents as well. These duelists are good and they can be great in the right hands, but they're just not must picks in really any situation, and that's why they're at the top of the B tier. Moving over towards our A tier though, this is where we started to change things up just a bit more. We still have Killjoy and Cypher right next to each other in the A tier. Both of these Sentinels do a great job of holding space for their team. Using tripwires, alarm bots, they can both have an incredible amount of impact in their games. With Cypher, you can get some pretty good vision denial with his cages and the ability to control territory from across the map, and with Killjoy you can get a lot of value out of her ultimate as well as some fantastic stalls from her mollies. It really depends on what map you're on and what Sentinel you want to run, but they're both really good and both saw a ton of play at Berlin. You're pretty much always going to run one or the other between Cypher and Killjoy, and in comp, whichever one you pick will really be the difference between a win or a loss. They're pretty interchangeable. Now moving up the A tier, we actually have KO now coming in. He was placed pretty low on the tier list, but due to the recent changes making it so his ultimate no longer deactivates when he gets downed, as well as his flashes just being all around a little bit faster and better, KO is for sure going to see much more play this patch. This ultimate change is super nice since before it used to deactivate. It almost incentivized the KO not being the first one in, even if he sort of had a free life. The problem being that obviously the silence from his ultimate was so good, you sort of didn't want to lose it by going in. This obviously provided counterplay for the enemy team to actually just headshot you quickly and cancel the ultimate as well, but now all counterplay is out the window. KO ulted? Alright, ready to be silenced for 10 seconds. Alright, I actually don't know how long it lasts, but it lasts for a while, and you guys get the point. KO is going to be overpowered, guys. It might not be this patch, and it might not be next patch, but you will eventually start to feel it. I promise you. Moving on to Raze, though. Raze is a great agent. We are actually seeing that in competitive, her boombot changes do sometimes make a difference, bringing the maximum damage down to 80, which although still is a lot of damage, does make it less scary to deal with. There are definitely times where I know that I'm going to be swung off of a boombot, and I'll just ignore it entirely to kill the enemy player, which I don't think would have been possible on the previous patch. That being said, Raze is still a great agent who provides a lot of value in ways that other duelists don't really. She has a ton of area control and lots of tools to play off of, and Raze is still super strong, and although she's not quite S tier right now, she's easily one of the best duelists in the game. Pretty much every team played her at least once at Berlin, dependent on what map they were on, and although she may be a situational pick, she's definitely one of the stronger ones in the game and is absolutely to be feared. This brings us to our last agent at the top of the A tier though, and that's going to be Sage. Sage actually takes a step down from our S tier from last time. Sage is still very strong and really brings something to the team that the other two Sentinels don't bring, whether it's her wall, being able to slice the map in half, or any other parts of her kit. Sage is awesome to have. That being said, we're noticing the teams are starting to find ways to sacrifice Sage, even on maps like Icebox, where she was considered very necessary, and it does introduce the idea that Sage isn't as much of a must pick as she might have been in the past. Especially after seeing the Icebox changes that make it a lot easier to plant on B site, Sage is slowly starting to lose a little bit of the value she had before. Sage is great, and you'll never be upset at having a Sage, but you don't need a Sage really anymore, and that's the main reason that we took her down. She's still seeing a ton of play at Berlin, and it's for good reason. She's strong, but as we've said before, you have options. And this brings us to the S tier, and as we have always said, these are the agents where you don't really have options. There were some changes from last time, as you already see Sage making her way down from the S tier, but with Sage going down, we'll actually have a new agent stepping up, so stay tuned for that. But first, we need to talk about what everyone is waiting for. Is Jett dead? Well, obviously not. She's still in the S tier. With the Jett changes, they made it so her right click is now as consistent as it was before, but it doesn't refresh on kills, and then they reduced her smoke to 2 charges. This is called for. Previously, before I saw the patch notes, I was going to place Jett as straight up the best agent in the game, after seeing her Berlin stats, which by the way were 100% pick rate. So this brings me to why Jett is still S tier. Yeah, she saw a nerf, losing 1 smoke and not having her knives refresh off the right click is annoying. However, the right click change only really stops Jett from having those huge plays where they run in and get 5 kills using the right click. She's still incredibly mobile and the best opper in the game. Her knives still are massive for her team's economy, and they still refresh off of left click kills. This change will dial her back a bit, but the things that make Jett annoying are still going to be annoying. You will still get right-clicked. As a matter of fact, you might get right-clicked more due to her knives being more consistent now, and these changes are good and I'm excited to see how they play out, but Jett is still going to be incredibly strong. Moving on to our new agent being added to the S tier though, and that's going to be Astra. Previously we put Astra a bit lower due to her skill floor, but times are changing folks, and if you've been watching Berlin, you'll see Astra is by far the most go-to controller in the tournament. She's hands down the best controller in the game right now, and if you want to play the best controller in the game, you pick Astra. Now, that does come with an asterisk. That means that Viper is also still going to be S tier. Viper is the only exception to the Astra rule that we just said, because on maps like Breeze and Icebox, Viper is still a very strong pick and almost always necessary. You can swap out Astra for Omen and you'll normally be alright, but Omen can't really do what Viper does on Breeze, and on that note, Astra can't even really do what Viper does on Breeze. Viper is in a class of her own on these large maps, and even on the other maps she's still incredibly strong. Especially for competitive, there's something to be said for her clutch potential with her Viper's Pit. You're actually capable of pulling off 1v3s due to Viper's ultimate, and that's something you definitely don't get from an agent like Omen nearly as much. Viper doesn't see as much pro play as Astra, obviously, since Astra is the all-around controller and Viper is more of a niche pick depending on the map, but she's still seen a ton and she's still incredibly strong. Moving up the tier list though, this brings us to our 2 best initiators in the game. The first one to top off our S tier is going to be Skye. Skye, even after all of the changes, should still be super strong. However, they did add a little bit more counterplay to her flash, as well as increase her ultimate charges. Her kit is still really awesome to have, and I don't think that's going to bring her down from S tier, but with the KO buffs, you'll likely see more people picking KO, and then because that Skye will get picked a little bit less, and since these 2 agents are pretty much in direct competition. And by the way, this is sort of what we were saying earlier, how it's not necessary to run a Phoenix or Reyna when you can run a Skye or a KO and get more info, incredibly fast flashes, and more impactful ultimates You know that sort of vibe. Basically, many teams are choosing to run Skye and Sova right now, and it's for good reason. Both of these agents just bring so much to the table. If you look at Skye's pro play, she's seeing a ton of pro play, and I don't expect that to change, once again, unless KO starts to be a replacement. Moving on to our OP tier of the week, I already said it, it's Sova as usual. I mentioned earlier I initially had Jett as our OP tier of the week. Due to the nerfs though, I don't feel like it's justified anymore. Sova is pretty much a must pick on every map right now, and you could try to replace him, but no agent is going to give you the sheer value that Sova can. Sovas can have literally 4 kills on a team and still be carrying with how much value that they provide, and that's hardly a cap. Sova is so strong. This is nothing new to you guys. Sova didn't really receive any nerfs this patch, and probably until he does, you'll be seeing him at the top of these tier lists. He was played a ton at Berlin with one of the highest pick rates in the game, and that's probably about as most people expected. We all know Sova is great, and this is nothing new. Thank you all for taking the time to look at our tier list though, and if you think there are changes that could be made, be sure to let us know in the comments down below. Also, if you wanted to check out any of the specific agent courses we have on the website, I highly recommend you do so using the link below. We recently got a bunch of Radiant players to walk you through real-time examples and games of how you can carry with every single agent in the game, so if you're looking for that kind of stuff, we have it. We also are currently getting a bunch of new VOD reviews where we break down viewer-submitted replays from the Discord and go in depth on how they can improve. We got a lot of stuff in the works basically, so be sure to check it all out at skillcapped.com, link in the description below. Anyways, that's going to do it for me here today. Thank you all for watching. My name is King, and we'll catch you in the next one.